Good morning, Facebook friends and YouTube followers. This is Rich again, back for your first video blog of the day for Friday, August 8, 2014, around 7:50 a.m. in Billerica, Massachusetts. The sun is shining. Going to be low humidity today. Highs around 80 degrees. Some news to report. The St. Louis Cardinals beat the Boston Red Sox by the score of 5-2 in the rubber match of the three-game series. And also the Washington Redskins beat the New England Patriots by the score of 23-6 in preseason football, but it was just preseason. The starters weren't playing the entire game and stuff like that. I don't pay attention too much to about preseason. Gotta wait until the NFL season starts soon, about 4 weeks away. And the Cleveland Indians announced that they're going to do renovations to 20-year-old Jacobs Field, now known as Progressive Field, and they're going to be reducing the stadium capacity from 43,000 to about 38,000. 5,000 seats are going to be eliminated for these renovations. Okay, my first video subject of the day is about the 10 greatest players in Edmonton Oilers history. The Edmonton Oilers started in the OWHA as the Alberta Oilers back in 1972, which they played some of their home games in Calgary, Alberta, and some of their games in Edmonton. They were rebranded as the Edmonton Oilers in 1974. In 1979, the WHA folded and they went into the National Hockey League, and they were a very successful franchise for the first 15 seasons in the league. They won 5 Stanley Cups. They made a Stanley Cup final in 1983, and they had some of the greatest talent of all time, but by the early to mid-90s, the talent level was shrinking because of the high escalating salaries of the NSA. Plus, they didn't have a good owner. Peter Pocklington sold a lot of its good players, and they were losing a lot. They tried to make a little bit of a revival in the 90s and 2000s, making the playoffs every single year, but they would get bounced in the first or second round. 2006, they made an unbelievable run to the Cup Finals, coming within one game of winning their 6th Stanley Cup, but they lost to the Carolina Hurricanes, and they have not been to the playoffs since then. It's been a long rebuilding process for the Edmonton Oilers, but these are the 10 greatest players in Edmonton Oilers history. The number 10 on the all-time Oilers list is goaltender Andy Moog. Andy Moog was kind of like the backup goaltender to the Grant Fuhrer during this time, but he was a great goaltender. It was like a 1-2 punch, a great goaltending tandem. He won 3 Stanley Cups with the Oilers, plus he made a couple of All-Star teams, and he's probably the second winningest goaltender in Oilers history. Andy Moog's at number 10. Number 9 is S.A. Tikkanen. He was a great defensive forward. He was like one of the Oilers version of Bob Gainey. He was a great defensive forward. He was on several Stanley Cup winning teams. I think the Oilers should retire his number 10, S.A. Tikkanen's number soon. Number 8 on the all-time list is defenseman Paul Coffey. Paul Coffey was probably one of the greatest defensemen in Oilers history. He scored close to 50 goals in a Oilers uniform. He played 3 Stanley Cups. He won 2 Norris trophies with the Oilers, and he's number 7's retired by the Oilers. He's a great defenseman of all time for the Oilers. Number 7 on this list, Ryan Smith. Ryan Smith is probably the best players in Oilers history post the Stanley Cup era, and he was a prolific 30 to 40 goal scorer and all-star for the Oilers. He had 2 stints with the Oilers. He was captain of them at one time, but he never won a Stanley Cup with the Oilers, but he's listed at number 7, and he was a very great player. Don't know if he's going to make the Hall of Fame, but the Oilers should retire number 94 for Ryan Smith. Number 6 on this list is defenseman Kevin Lowe. Lowe played 14 years with the Oilers, and he was probably their best defenseman. He was a great defensive defenseman, and he was on 5 Stanley Cup winning teams. He's still with the Oilers as GM and Vice President of Hockey Operations, and I think the Oilers should retire his number 4 as up to the rafters soon. But Taylor Hall was number 4. Maybe they could switch him off to wear 44. Yeah, that'd be good. Number 5 on the all-time list of Oilers great players is Glenn Anderson. He was a great center, Glenn Anderson, and forward. He was on 5 Stanley Cup winning teams. He scored over close to 400 goals in a Oilers uniform. I think he's the 3rd top leading scorer of all time for the Oilers, and as number 9 retired by the Oilers. Number 4 on that list is Grant Fuhrer, goaltender. Fuhrer's the best goaltender in Oilers history. He's the all-time winningest goaltender. He won 4 Stanley Cups with the Oilers, and he won the 1988 Vezina Trophy as best NHL goaltender, clutch goaltender, and his number 31's retired by the Oilers, and he's a Hall of Famer. Number 3 on this list, Jari Kurri. He was a pure goal scorer, and he always would be on the line with Wayne Gretzky, and Wayne Gretzky would always set up many of his goals, and with a prolific goal scorer. Yeah, I think he's 2nd on the all-time list for most goals in a Oilers uniform. He has over 400 goals in an Oilers uniform, and number 17 retired by the Oilers, so he's at number 3. Number 2 on the all-time list is Mark Messier. Mark Messier was a very good player with the Oilers, and he scored over 400 goals with them, and he was captain of them. He was the captain of them, leading them to the Stanley Cup in 1990. He's the last Oilers captain to lead the Oilers to the Stanley Cup, and he's an all-around player. Number 11's retired by the Oilers, and the number 1 greatest player of all time for the Edmonton Oilers, number 99 himself, Wayne Gretzky. Wayne Gretzky set a lot of NHL records with the Oilers. He brought the Oilers to prominence back in the 80s. He's the best franchise player of all time in the NHL. He's the greatest player, and he put Edmonton on the hockey map, winning 4 Stanley Cups. He was the captain of all 4 of his Stanley Cup winning teams. Too bad he got traded to the LA Kings in 1988. If he stayed with the Oilers, I guarantee you that the Oilers probably would have won many more Stanley Cups. I think that they could have won maybe at least 5, 6, 7, 8 more Stanley Cups. You never know what would have happened. And that's about it for the Oilers' greatest players of all time. I'll be back later on today with another one of these video blogs, and they're getting to be more entertaining and stuff. And tomorrow's on my continuation list of the greatest NHL players of all time for each team. I will have the 4-time Stanley Cup winning New York Islanders, and this is going to be a great list. I'm going to be continuing to do these lists for the all 30 NHL teams. It's going to be very hard to pick the 10 greatest players from the Nashville Predators and the Columbus Blue Jackets and the Florida Panthers, but I'll compile a list, don't worry, I will. Goodbye, Facebook friends and YouTube followers. See you later on.